Hello, everybody. It's Zeus Caraval from ZK Research, and I'm here for week 51 of 2020. Now, it was kind of a light week for news, so my compadre here, Dave Michaels, aka Santa with the hat,
Yes, hello.
yeah, instead of doing a news recap, we're actually going to do the 5 top themes of 2020. And Dave, this was a big year of change. I mean, we think communication changes every year, but boy, did it change in 2020. And so,
I'm not even sure if we've seen a lot of change this year or not, because I think next year 2021 is going to be even more change. I think 2020 was kind of a warm-up act, which is the first theme. Basically, is the pandemic caused a form of digital acceleration, but it was really digital acceleration in a emergency matters, like putting out the fire, and they did everything obvious. We got people working at home. We did everything that we could just to keep the doors open and the lights on, etc. But next year, now that we're looking at, the vaccines are shipping and we're looking at a potential end to this pandemic, I think it's going to become much more strategic. So I think we're going to see actually much more changes to workflow in 2021. We're going to see a much more strategic adoption of the cloud as opposed to emergency adoption. We're going to see more strategic distributed work, not just work from home. We're going to see big changes at the office, new hardware, new layouts, new equipment, et cetera. We're going to see new kinds of micro verticals. We always talk about healthcare and government and education, but there's going to be so many new verticals that are created because every industry has new requirements about how they're trying to figure out their digital workflows. So I think we're going to see a lot more changes next year. What do you think, Zeus?
Yeah, at the beginning of in March, I think it was Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, that said Microsoft saw 2 years of digital transformation in the first 2 months of that quarter. And that theme, not only did it stick through the rest of 2020, but it kind of accelerated. Now, as you mentioned, a lot of it was almost emergency use cases. But I do think a lot of the things we've seen are going to stick. For instance, before we never really did a lot of telemedicine, right? I think maybe 10, 15% of people got treated over video, but now that's become the norm, and that's going to stick. Old people, sick people do not like to have to drive an hour to go to the doctor to be told, yeah, you're fine, come back in a month, right? I think you look at what Cisco rolled out with their connected justice system, what Zoom rolled out with connected schools. Those kind of things are here to stay as well, and you can expand that. And I think one of the interesting things that all these digital platforms inserted to business has created is better ways of doing things, and it helped businesses get customers to do things that they've been trying to get them to do for years. So, for instance, you think of a retailer like Starbucks. They've been trying for years to get people to use the mobile app more, but people like to stand in 50-person line to buy coffee, but now you have to, right? So I think from that aspect, we're finally starting to see, we've been talking about this CEBP, communication enabled business processes, for, oh, good Lord, a decade now, right? Or even longer. But we saw the rise of those because of the pandemic, and I think that's here to stay. And I think that's a really good thing for the industry, because now for finally,
we're going to do what we've been talking about.
Yeah. And that's good for everybody. So, because it actually does make life a lot better in a lot of ways. So that's we can look at 2020 from a negative standpoint, but there's a lot of positives that came out of that. I think the second biggest theme of 2020, Dave, was the rise of Ring Central. This was a company that was already doing pretty well, but they exploded in 2020. And in fairness, some of it started in 2019 with the partnership with Avaya. But since then, they announced a partnership with Atos, Alcatel-Lucent Enterprise, AT&T, and a big one, I think, is Vodafone, because that gets them into Europe, into the mobile landscape. And now they're at a point where everybody loves Ring. Resellers love Ring. Heck, every time they announce something, they announced a free version of their product, and Vlad's on Kramer, right? And this is a product that's going to generate no revenue, but the people look at it because Rings do. I guess when I look at what Ring is, they've achieved the status of thought leader in the industry. So whenever they do something, it takes notice, whether it's revenue generated or not, or whatever. They had a good, they had a developer event, and I think if you remember back a few years ago, we used to talk about would 8x8 or Ring be bigger. Well, it's clearly now Ring, and I think I'm expecting big things from them next year. I think you'll continue to see the partnership standpoint. They've barely touched Asia, they've barely touched Latin America, and they're growing their CPaaS business out. But I think this is the company now that can step on the gas and really become a big dominant SaaS player.
Yeah, I would say Ring Central's breakout is actually a little bit unexpected. When they announced it in 2019 that they were partnering with Avaya, that was a big surprise for a lot of folks, and it certainly was for me. But the whole UCaaS industry had been kind of in a pack, a herd, whatever you want to call them. Just kind of everybody was kind of coming out the same feature. Hey, we have a mobile client. Hey, we have this feature. Hey, we have that feature. And it was just kind of a pack, and the whole industry was very clustered together. What Ring Central did fairly early was they figured out how to work with carriers. And that was a hard lesson they had to learn. They got mentored and tutored on that, and then all of a sudden it's scaling out. And so for us to call this a trend is I think it's going to continue. I think they're going to sign up more carriers. The Vodafone was just a couple of weeks ago, and I think that they're going to keep on expanding their portfolio. I'm actually really interested. I talked about this before with Vodafone and AT&T working on their wireless integration into 5G networks and having a UCaaS on 5G. I believe they have a CCaaS in the works that they'll probably launch sometime soon. So I don't think they're done yet, and I think it's really impressive what the Ring Central team has done. All right, so the third theme that we want to identify here in this episode is the consolidation of pure plays. Over the years, we saw UCaaS kind of go from just voice only to voice messaging and meetings, but all these pure plays are also kind of disappearing. We had this year in 2020, we had Blue Jeans get acquired by Verizon. We had High Five get acquired by Dialpad. We just had Slack acquired by Salesforce. That was a pure play. And of course, Lifesize and Serenova were two pure plays that became a multi-play. So that we're seeing the consolidation of pure plays, or the elimination, I should say, maybe of pure plays. And I don't think that trend is going to go away either. What are your thoughts on that, Zeus?
Yeah, I think what we've seen to date, Dave, is the consolidation to add functionality, right? So, Ring would buy somebody and add a certain feature. We saw Dialpad, as you mentioned, buy High Five to add room system capabilities. I think what we're going to see in 2021 is the continued consolidation, but I think we are going to see some two areas. One is the complete platform play. So I do think you might see some CCaaS, CPaaS, UCaaS consolidation, right? So vendors looking to add to their stack, because I think that's important. And I think the other area is consolidation for share, right? Because we really haven't seen a lot of that yet. But the market, I do believe in the cloud communication space, there is too much supply and not enough demand. You look at all the little pure plays out there, some that start a Star, a Fuse, heck, even a Vonage, an 8x8. When you look at those market caps compared to the big guys in the space, like a Zoom or Ring, companies like that, those smaller ones are pretty small now in comparison. And I do think you could see either maybe a Vonage and 8x8 merge to create a bigger company, or Vlad use some of those multi-billion-dollar market cap, or Eric, on the Zoom side, and consolidate for that. So I think the consolidation will continue, but the purpose will be now more more for a land grab, either by moving into another market or for consolidation purposes. Dave, I think another really important theme of 2020 was the rise of AI. And without a doubt, I think AI was one of the biggest themes coming into the year. It's one of the biggest things exiting the year, and it's going to be one of the biggest themes in 2020. And we saw a shift in the use of AI, both in unified communications and the contact center. And you see AI really change from something that gave us some whiz-bang features like the virtual backgrounds we have, and the ability to put mustaches and hats on people like that. And by the way, that is a real hat on Dave, not an AI hat.
And mustache.
Yeah, and it's shifted to some more features that are actually going to bring us closer to that vision that G2 and Java talked about at Cisco, making virtual meetings 10x better than in person. Because it's going to give us capabilities that are frankly impossible to do with in person. Like, for instance, transcription capabilities are cool, but I'm really looking forward to meeting notes, because by the time you take a transcription of an hour-long meeting, pulling all those kind of important meeting notes out is really difficult.
I mean, I noticed with hour-long meetings with you, I only have like one or two sentences of things that are important.
Well, it can be pretty short meeting notes, and so at least I have a couple of things, Dave. So let's not throw stones in glass houses here. I think on the contact center side, the use of AI is even more important, because that actually has a pretty profound impact on customer experience. If you saw some of the things that AWS announced at reInvent, the things to be able to like voice print somebody. So the next time you call into the contact center, Dave, you don't have to give out your social and things like that to get into your banking information, right? So it just knows who you are. You'll be able to do more things through bots. In fact, I saw Avaya and Genesis, although this is in a Newsweek, recently announced that they're virtual agents and bots that can be used to actually help with COVID information dissemination or the vaccine dissemination, because it'll be they're expecting such a rise in that. So I think, we saw AI come into 2020. It had a big impact on UC and CC. And I know, you and I have talked about this becoming more invisible on things too.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the contact center piece of it, because the augmented agent technology, I think, is going to completely change the contact center. It's going to change the training programs. It's going to change how we hire in the contact center. It's going to change how long it takes to get somebody to be fully productive in the contact center. Huge ramifications. There's gig economy ramifications, all kinds of stuff. And I think that's a pretty significant one. But as much as AI is getting better and has gotten better, and you mentioned the hats and stuff like that, but I think it's important to talk about how important the blurred backgrounds and the background substitution that like behind Zia's, how important that's been during the year pandemic, because a lot of people have been working in homes that didn't have good setup environments. You don't want to know where Zia's is right now, by the way, but it's made the pandemic much more productive, to be honest. But as much as AI has gotten better, I think it's also important that our expectations, the public expectations, have gotten lower. We have a better idea of what to expect from our AI. I know when I get a chatbot at a contact center, what kinds of questions I could probably ask and get answers to, and what kinds I can't. We all have experience with things like Alexa and Google Assistant. We know what it can do, and we know what it can't do. So as our expectations are normalizing and the technologies are getting better, there's a lot less frustration of what's happening. And as a result, AI is getting much better in 2020.
Yeah, and the one final point I want to make on AI is I do think AI got democratized in 2022. The fact that Google, Amazon, NVIDIA, companies like that made their AI really a service that can be streamed from the cloud if you want to, allows some of the smaller UCaaS vendors, startups, organizations like that could never have hired their own data scientists to be able to use it. So I think the democratization of AI actually creates this big wave of innovation that we're still yet to realize the benefits.
Okay, so our last theme we want to talk about for 2020 is hardware is back. We've talked about this in a few episodes on news recaps, but there's this common myth, a very common myth, that all that matters anymore is software, whether it be something you install or something you purchase as a service in the cloud. But that's all that matters is software. And it's certainly not true with smartphones. We love our smartphones, but it's actually not true in most areas. Hardware is still really important. And if you look at just in the enterprise communication space, you look around the vendors, Cisco just launched a whole bunch of new endpoints. Microsoft has been launching hardware for quite a few years now. Their Surface stuff, their new SIM-based Windows version of laptop. Google's all over hardware, from doorbells to speakers to all kind, and of course they make their own chips. Facebook has their Portal, which has become all of a sudden an enterprise device on multiple platforms. Hardware-focused companies are doing well. Logitech, Poly, Jabra, even like Nariva, which is kind of very specialized in like classrooms and stuff. They're all doing great. Hardware is really important, and I think people are beginning to understand that. And one of the reasons why the vendors are so excited about hardware is because it drives loyalty. And so room systems are drive loyalty. Room panels are becoming the new thing until 2021. You got desktop devices, you got personal devices from headphones or headsets. You've got people are starting meetings now from their personal devices or sharing content from the personal devices. We care about our personal devices. We're passionate about our personal devices. Apple's $500 headphones give you an idea of how much people care about their personal devices. Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad you added this one because I'm so tired of the rhetoric that hardware doesn't matter anymore. And you look at the markets where you've tried to offer commodity hardware, even like go back to the PC days, Dave. When you had those low-end Dell laptops that had cheap components in them, you really couldn't do anything with them other than maybe Word. I remember talking to Microsoft about this early on when they were trying to get people to use their PCs for calling. One of the problems they said was the PC manufacturers trying to go down to the absolute cheapest hardware device that's out there because it didn't have the quality of camera or audio. Then on the other side, you look at something like Apple and the quality that they put in their devices, the experience is outstanding. Even with mobile phones, people pay up for the experience of an iPhone, where Androids had a lot of hit or misses, right? Because some devices are good, but those are premium devices. And so there's a very, very, I guess, thin line that's blurred almost between hardware and software. And some things are best optimized in hardware, like packet processing and things like that. Some things are best optimized in software. And the one thing most of the manufacturers are starting to understand now is some things are best optimized in silicon, right? Cisco's always been spun their own silicon. Apple's building their own chips. You mentioned Google is, right? So we've got more GPUs and things. And so this is a world where the best experience is going to win. And that's a combination of silicon, hardware, software. And I think the fact that our buddy Kevin Keeler said, no, there's lots of software companies out there. All the ones he named actually make hardware.
I noticed that too.
So the fact that big software companies now are getting into the software game is just a proof point for that. And so maybe we'll take hardware, merge it with AI, and that's when we'll get our robots coming up back to kill us. But until that happens, everybody should expect to have a pretty good experience at home and in the office on a lot of the new hardware devices that are coming.
So that wraps up our 5 key trends or themes emerging out of 2020. We're going to be back with one more episode for 2020, and it'll be a regular news episode, except for instead of focusing on 1 week, we're going to focus on 2 weeks because it's kind of a slow time of year. So we'll be back with that, and then Happy New Year, and we'll see you next week.
Happy holidays, everybody.